Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have to cobble together something of a wrap-up of the last week of my reading. When last we spoke, I was feeling a bit disheartened by Victorian fiction, so I had given up reading Sylvia's Lovers to focus on reading more modern fiction, namely The Quickening by Rhiannon and Nudibranch by Irenosen Okojie. That was where I left off my last one of these videos, and then I recorded a video on Monday. I will leave this next clip here talking about how my reading was going on Monday, and then we'll get back to this. It's Monday, and once again, we are going to try and be much more hopeful about this week. This is the second and final week I have off in October. On the one hand, I think, let's not make any videos and let's have this calm before the storm type scenario. And there is another part of me that thinks there's only 12 more days and then Victober is over. When last we spoke, I was a bit maudlin about the fact that I wasn't really liking Sylvia's Lovers that much. Indeed, at the end of my vlog, there was just a bit of writing in which I said I was going to start reading Barchester Towers immediately. I also said how I wanted to get some reading done of The Quickening by Rhiannon, not a Victorian book, but the only place I can currently mention it in regards to what I'm reading. So I have read up to page 100 of this. Worked well as a palate cleanser, which is exactly what I wanted, but whilst I was reading it, I found myself then missing the writing of the Victorians, so it did me a favour really. Something somewhat strange happened last night. It was after midnight and everyone else was in bed. I was supposed to be reading The Quickening. My father had gone to bed and left me watching Rambo 2, which masculine dude cauterising his own wound with gunpowder just made no sense to me. Indeed, my father went to bed because I'd upset him by poking too many holes in the film. That was just a moment of reflection for me trying to actually find some part of me that cared. I ended up picking up Sylvia's Lovers at 15:15 midnight and reading until 1 o'clock last night, and I'm now at page 115. I've no idea what happened. I don't know where this sudden shift came from. I think maybe it's because I'd convinced myself that I can actually read this slowly. It made no sense to me that I suddenly felt like I could figure out what the characters were saying. And then, if you remember, in last week's video, I talked about how some of the accents seemed more like Newcastle to me than Yorkshire. Turns out half these characters are from Newcastle, so it makes perfect sense. Therefore, I don't know whether it's just, as a reader, taking time to get used to Gaskell's dialogue. There was something in the narratorial voice that enraptured me last night, and it felt very much like having a story told to you. And that's something that I love within fiction, is this sense of you feel as though there is a person there telling the story to you. It's not just a record of events. And I could just imagine this book being read. It also spoke to me on the level of it being a farming family, and Sylvia has no wish to become educated despite the fact that her mother wants her to. And it reminds me so much of my younger brother, who, and even my nephew now, who don't see the point in learning because they just want to be going about the farm and that's what they're focused on. And Sylvia has something like that where she doesn't see the point of it because she can't see as it ever having any use in her life. Then I began to think that Gaskell's drawing these characters very well. There are moments of tension there. The reader can see them. There's the dramatic irony there. And there are even touches of comedy, which I hadn't expected because I was saying that this book was a slog and it was somewhat difficult to get through. But the next chapter and then further on, I feel like it's just going to keep hopefully getting easier. However, I do also think that it's a book that I am going to take my time with, and I'm not going to put pressure on myself to try and finish it all in the week. Which does mean that alongside Sylvia's Lovers, I am planning on picking up Barchester Towers. I am not going to read the back of this book. I'm just going to go into it blind, similar to how I went with The Warden, because I know that sometimes blurbs can spoil very major events in the book. I enjoyed The Warden so much, and I just don't feel ready to leave Trollope's prose yet, or this world yet. So again, another book that I'm going to dip in and out of over the next week. This is where I think I'm going to mention my plans for the week, is to read Sylvia's Lovers and to read Barchester Towers. And then I've pulled some more shorter books off my shelves to read daily, similar to the way I'm using the Quickening as a palate cleanser. So I really do want to read Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Mary Lands by Mary Seacole. I'm seeing a lot more readers pick this book up this month, and I'm just wondering, did we all hear the same thing on the radio and find out about her and realise that this was something that was missing from our history lessons at school, and we really want to know all about Mary Seacole? Then I want to read Lord Arthur Savile's Crime by Oscar Wilde. This does come from some jealousy of Sarah over at Hardcover Hearts reading The Canterville Ghost, and unfortunately I don't have that one, but I do have this. I want to read the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins with As Kingfishers Catch Fire. And I also want to read Oscar Wilde's Wit, Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast. Is this one of the books that Charlie Brooks sent to me? It might be. And then Of Street Pieman by Henry Mayhew, because I really would like to get some more non-fiction context of this time. Because I want something spooky, and that's what I was looking for with The Quickening. I am also going to add the picture of Dorian Gray to my TBR, because this is a relatively short book at less than 300 pages. So I feel like, similar to The Warden, it might be a nice thing to read over a few nights. Also, we have a Cosy reading night coming up this Friday, so I think that that is going to be the finale of this week's vlog, is that this weekend is Cosy reading weekend. I don't plan on doing separate vlogs for that, so I think the finale will centre around that, and I think that this will be one of the books that I read in that time. Anyway, that is me for the day, and I think that what I needed was some time to sleep and not force reading. And as a few people mentioned in my comments yesterday, don't force the reading and just take the relaxed approach. And I've noticed that I'm quite happier when I take the relaxed approach. I mean, look at my hair. Doesn't this hair just say extremely relaxed to you? As you can see, I was actually feeling somewhat more hopeful on Monday, but that is how I am at the start of every week. Even though I say about liking to live my life in the present and not making plans too much, although I'm a huge planner, I don't know why I say that, but I always try and talk about looking forward to the future but not allowing it to inform what we're doing now. Just get what we're doing now done. Unfortunately, well, fortunately for me actually, things happened in my life this week. Like, this is the first time I've had off where things just seem to get in the way of reading and I didn't mind them. I will talk about them. Firstly, what I need to put into context about the Monday clip, which I haven't talked about all, was on Sunday last week, after I'd uploaded the vlog here, I was feeling really restless. So you might have been able to tell it in the final clip of that video that I had reached this point of just being incredibly fed up. And for me, what I found, which if you told younger Charlie this, he would have just sat in his fucking sadness rather than do anything about it, I chose to go for a walk down the canal. But this came from a place of feeling incredibly restless, like if I didn't leave the house, I was going to explode internally. So I just threw on my jeans and a coat, my hat, because my hair was a mess, and I just went walking. Now, I am aware that I stomped too hard down the runway. Charlie went too hard down that towpath. I reached a destination that usually takes me an hour to get to in half an hour. Now, you might be looking at me and we're thinking, Charlie, let's not forget you've lost the tiniest bit of weight. I talk about it in every video. We're still getting there. I did originally think that myself, that I just gone faster because I can go a bit faster nowadays. That wasn't it. It was just this energy within me had built up so much that I was basically just walking as brisk as I ever walked before in my life. And I got to this destination and turned around, came back, and by the time I got home, my feet were in pain like they'd not been in ages. My hips were bad, and I thought, athletes warm up before doing exercise. Now, I'm not an athlete, and so if they're doing that, Lord only knows what I've done to my body. Well, things weren't going well, and I ended up reaching Monday in a whole host of pain. I was popping those painkillers like candy. Not like candy, because we don't get candy in the UK. Indeed, I wasn't popping them too much because, well, yeah. Monday was a write-off, really. I did, however, record that clip that you saw, and I did get some reading done. Tuesday, my mum was off work, and I just thought I want to have another day without recording anything, without documenting anything, and I thought it was okay to do that at the start of the week. Nothing much had changed since Monday, everything was fine. I had continued to read a bit of Sylvia's Lovers, but nothing much. I hadn't read any of Barchester Towers, and I was looking back at this video and thinking about it, and thinking I was really optimistic at the start of this week. However, on Tuesday, I did finish reading Nudibranch by Irenosen and Okojie. I also read Olala by Robert Louis Stevenson. If I could happen to find that little black classic before the end of the month, that'd be fine. The problem is with Charlie that I put stuff down thinking that it's a safe place, and then I forget what that safe place was. Also, this week, my nephew came down from Northumberland. Well, my brother... I also realised that I moved on to talking about Tuesday without even mentioning the fact that I finally watched Onward on Monday, which has been another thing I've wanted to do throughout all of these Victober videos. But that leads into Wednesday. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave another clip here because I recorded it and it's exceptionally long. And I just will let Friday's Charlie explain where he's been for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, why he didn't record, and then we'll return here. Tuesday, I chose not to record, and that was the day that I was reading, and basically, I hadn't read anything, and I thought there's no point updating you if I hadn't read anything. Wednesday, I didn't realise that my brother was coming down from Northumberland because his girlfriend was taking a tractor test. I ended up looking after my nephew all day Wednesday so as my brother could help my father with some sheep work. Fine, I don't mind. Love seeing my nephew. Haven't got as much chance to see him this year because of everything going on. So, had a really great day in which no reading happened at all. Thursday, my dad had said to me the day before, would I like to go up the field and see some pups? And you know me, I will do anything for the chance to see young animals. Like, if anyone had tried to stop me in his van when I was a child, I wouldn't have got into that van for Haribo, but if you promised me the glance at like a Cocker Spaniel puppy, I'd have been in there, I'd have been kidnapped, taken sort of situation. They probably wouldn't have got anything out of me because I'm an incredibly lazy person and always was, but still. Maybe that's why I developed such agoraphobia. The fear of men in white vans with puppies. Either way, after that rather dark thought, let's move along to today. Basically, I read Olala by Robert Louis Stevenson on Tuesday. And then I finished off reading the stories in Nudibranch. I'll talk about this elsewhere because it's not Victorian, but this is by Irenosen Okojie and is a short story collection this is a short story collection by Irenosen Okojie that is incredibly subversive because you'll be going along very nicely thinking you're reading a simple short story, like a classically told short story, and the author will subvert it. There will be something dark there, something surreal. The touch of magic realism is strong in this one, and I thoroughly adored the weird, dark parts of this. Indeed, it made me question whether comedy is the route I should be going down, and whether I ought not to just admit that I am incredibly dark-minded. But let's put that aside for now and question who we are later. And Olala on the back promises to be a vampiric story. Indeed, it says, a chilling Victorian Gothic novella about decaying aristocracy, vampirism and tormented love. So I went to Wikipedia after reading this, and there is actually some contention as to whether this book counts as a vampire novella, because there isn't much going on in the way of vampires in here. There's nothing much classical. There's the hints with the red hair and the protagonist ends up getting bitten, but I'd say this is more the Gothic tale of, as it says on the back, decaying aristocracy. There are some beautifully written passages in just this 50-page novella, but it's not. Again, this is a book that I am never going to reread or look to again. Indeed, at only 50 pages, I thought it went on for too long, because in the end, there's nothing vampiric about it. This guy just ends up falling in love with somebody he can never love. And they're in a mountain setting. Yes, it's Gothic. Yes, there's some nice imagery, but that's it. That's the level of it. That's as far as we can go with that one. Then I only have 100 pages left of The Quickening, and that will be read before Cosy reading night. Sorted. I should say that The Quickening is a Gothic story set in the 1920s, 30 years after this famous seance happened at a house, and the owner, again decaying aristocracy here, has decided to recreate the seance with the original medium to see if there's anything more they can find out so they can talk with the spirits. Arthur Conan Doyle's in here, who was very much into the spiritualist movement, and it turns out that there might be darker goings-on in this house. Rhiannon Ward is the pseudonym for Sarah Ward, a rightfully acquaintance of mine who previously wrote the In Bitter Chill crime series starring DC Connie Childs. I will give more thoughts on this in a video that I have planned, which will talk about my interest in this book and what I thought of it in the end. How am I doing with Sylvia's Lovers? I've read a chapter. It was a very good chapter about the new year and a party that was going on, and we're slowly getting the beginnings of the cracks in Sylvia's relationships with people. I think I'm going to really like it, and I look forward to rereading it once I've properly got the full story, but it hasn't... It dips in and out for me. Sometimes it has my attention, and sometimes I'm just lost with it. Anyway! I said I wasn't going to talk for long. Talked for a while there. So yes, I looked after my nephew on Wednesday, and he decided that if he created a team of Power Rangers, I could definitely be on his team. He didn't give me a colour, but I would get to be the sheep Power Ranger. And he would get to be the goat Power Ranger. So I'm guessing we're like arms on a Megazord. Unfortunately, I was hoping for something a lot more, you know, vicious than a sheep. Like a Slow Loris, or a capybara, but there we go. Therefore, that was my entire day. He wanted to play outside a lot, and so my day from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night was spent with my nephew, and it was great. I haven't seen him since July, and before that, I haven't seen him since before lockdown. So it was very nice to catch up with him, speak to him, hear how he's doing at school, and explain to him that it's okay that his reading level isn't at the same as other children yet. Because I think that both him and his parents are worried about this, and I just keep saying to them, don't worry about it. Reading ages are subjective. People grow at different rates, but I think he sees all of my books and he thinks, well, Charlie can do all this, but I could say to him, well, I should have probably said to him, that when I was his age, the teachers thought that my reading age was a bit lower than everyone else's. And I got a bit cocky. I wasn't having it. So I remember saying to my teacher, if I read through all of these books in the box, could I move on to the next box of books? Because I was not happy with the choice. So she said, yes. So I was taking a book every single night. Every night. I read all of the flaming fables in the world, trying to get to read this better selection of books. He was a bit disappointed about that. And then on Thursday, the opportunity arose for me to go and me to look at these pups of my dad's. I didn't get to spend as much time with them as I wanted. And he said, you should have just said it, I would have let you stay with them more. So this week I get to wake up early again to go and see some pups. So, Cosy reading night. That is I don't know how often Lauren of Lauren and the Books is hosting the Cosy reading night now, but the next clip that's going to happen is from Friday as well, where I have decided that I was going to try and participate in Lauren of Lauren and the Books Cosy Reading Weekend to actually try and get some more books finished this week. So let's do that now. Let us now talk about Cosy Reading Night. Cosy Reading Night is a event hosted by Lauren of Lauren and the Books, and it's all about people taking time out of their day to say to themselves, look, I'm going to relax. I'm not going to do anything else but read for this set period of time. And it's all about just, I'd say, reacclimatizing really, and just allowing yourself and saying to yourself, look, this is what you've got to do now. You're just being cozy. You don't have to worry about anything else going on in the world. Just read something and decompress for a bit. I've failed a lot of them recently. It's just who I am. There's something within me that at the moment is saying I do not have the time for reading, despite the fact that I've just been off work for a fortnight and I could have read the entire time, and I didn't. I started pretty late in the first hour, so I'm probably going to keep going till 11 o'clock, but I now have about 60 pages left of The Quickening by Rhiannon Ward. I wasn't really sure what I was going to read, but I did manage to whittle it down in the end. I'll give more thoughts on this at a later date, once I've read it, but I will say that I think other books have done a similar story and done it better. There are moments of greatness in this book, but I think that they're lost behind some rather mundane prose. So I like it, and I think it is doing what it wants to do, to be this gothy pseudo-supernatural tale, but it's more a book where I don't really think it's the most brilliant. But I'm going to be finishing this book within the next hour, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to move on to, but I am just going to have some yogurt and then read. I'd say excuse the bed hair, but I don't care enough. It's now Saturday. As I thought would happen, I didn't get the opportunity to update you last night. My brother and my father both went to bed, not together. We're not that kind of family. We might be a farming family, but we are all lucky enough to have our own individual bedrooms. But as farmers, they have to be up early. So I couldn't record when my bedroom is right next door to my brother's. So I did finish reading The Quickening by Rhiannon Ward. As I've been saying, Rhiannon Ward is the pseudonym for Sarah Ward, a writerly acquaintance of mine. I don't believe this is her best book, but I do plan on doing a video based around this book, why I was interested in this book in particular, and my likes and dislikes. Almost a general thoughts video. I then started on The Mercies by Kiran Millwood-Hargrave. Only the dust jacket here because I take them off to read the books. I got 50 pages into this one last night. Overall, I am enjoying the tone. it's a tone that matches up with the story quite well, in my opinion. We will see how I feel. So far there's been a tragedy occurring with a ship off the coast, and when that happened it reminded me of another book which I then went on to read. So I read some more of Sylvia's Lovers. I have now read the New Year's party portion, which was very thrilling to me and seemed quite festive. And then I've read another 2 chapters, so that's about 30 pages of this one. It's quite slow going for me still, but I think that as I move forward, the story gains more depth and becomes easier to follow. I know from Katie's review that this story really picks up in the second half, so I'm hoping to reach that today, so maybe the 250 page mark, and then move on to trying to finish it this week. But we do have another portion of the Cosy Reading Night today, and I did have a big selection of books that I wanted to get to. I saw that Emily over at Novel Novels had started the Graveyard book last night, and I've been considering rereading this, so it seems like an omen to maybe have a go at this, you know, as we head up to Halloween. I also remembered this book, The Spindlers by Lauren Oliver, and my very water-damaged copy was a book that I took with me when I went to Whitby for the first time 7 years ago. And because I want to read Dracula this week and acquired it there, I'd quite like to read this book. It's a spooky story in which Liza's brother Patrick has been kidnapped and she has to go into this underground world in order to save him. And I just remember being completely enthralled and enamoured by this story when I read it. I want to return to this world, and it had the sort of magic fantasy adventure that I know had I read as a child, it would have been one of those stories that I just read and read and read all year round. It's perfect for the autumnal season, so I really think that over the next week I want to add these to my TBR as well. Might be good for Believathon that's coming up in November, and yes, I might have purchased some books for that as well. I'm writing a children's book, so you know I have to continue to read children's literature, and there are some excellent middle grade books out there that I haven't read enough of this year. I am very much a mood reader, so my wants to what I want to read changes all the time. So last night it was the Mercies, and this morning it was Sylvia's Lovers, and over the next few hours of Cosy Reading Night it could change. I could choose to just stick to Sylvia's Lovers, I could choose to start the Graveyard book or the Spindlers. Nobody knows how this is going to go, not even me. I might be able to catch up with you more today because there's nobody at home until 4 o'clock, so you might get the opportunity to see this really terrible, bedraggled appearance. This is what Charlie looks like when he can't be bothered. For now, I'm gonna leave these things here. I'm gonna leave things here, and I'll see you later. So we are now about to embark upon the second hour of Cosy Reading Afternoon, and I have continued to read Sylvia's Lovers. I didn't expect what happened to happen in the way it happened. Rather enjoying where the story's gone after the twist, it is very duplicitous. Having found this book a struggle to get into last week, I am now incredibly surprised because there's some really good storytelling here. There's plants and payoffs and the most inconsequential talk of a ribbon where you think this is just a piece of description actually ends up being really important to the story. The fact is, it feels like a very human story and very realistic. I've now reached the halfway point with this book, and I think I might actually continue reading it because it's just piqued my interest today and captured me, which I guessed would happen from taking it slowly until I reach this point where everything is going a bit chaotic and the story has exploded, and it's going to be interesting to see how Gaskell pulls all the pieces back together for this tale. I'm going to continue reading Sylvia's Lovers until at least 4 o'clock, and then we'll see what happens for the final hour. Am I in pyjamas at 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon? Yes. Does this make me feel somewhat like an old man? Yes. Do I care? No. No, I do not. Basically, all of my family finally left the house again at 4 o'clock. I don't dislike my family, but I'm really appreciative of silence and moments of quiet. So I chose to go and have a bath and listen to my audiobook of The Last Continent by Terry Pratchett, because I also have a Bluetooth speaker that I bought secondhand from the charity shop, and I didn't mind taking that in there. We have reached the end of the Cosy Reading Afternoon, hosted by Lauren of Lauren and the Books. This is part of the Cosy Reading Weekend. So last night there were 3 hours of reading, there's been another 3 hours now, and tomorrow will be Cosy Reading Morning from 7 AM until 10 AM GMT. Also tonight the clocks go back, so whilst you could have an extra hour in bed, well, you will still get an extra hour in bed, but you could spend longer in bed, or you could get up and join everyone reading. Now, I don't know what will happen, because there is every chance that my body will decide that it's not going to fall asleep again, and then the idea of getting up to read will just be thrown out the window. But I'm imagining that I might awaken early and listen to an audiobook, then maybe read some more of Sylvia's Lovers. Indeed, I have now read 100 pages of Sylvia's Lovers for this Cosy Reading Afternoon. Yes, I showed you some other books that I had planned, and this wasn't even on there, but ultimately it grabbed my attention, and I found that I'd much rather spend my time dedicated to one book as opposed to others. Yes, it does take me somewhat longer to read Victorian novels as opposed to more modern works. Had I been reading the Mercies, then I might have been able to actually get that book finished in the time allowed. But it's Victober, and I am really enjoying reading Gaskell's descriptions in this book, and I look forward to seeing where it's going. She's crafted this great web where it's not even a love triangle, because there is one character who is in love with another character, but that person's in love with another character who is in love with another character who is in love with another character. So what's that? Is that like a love pentagon? I don't know. But these people are all in love with the wrong person, and to me that feels somewhat Shakespearean in scope. And I could also see this working as a modern drama. I love the idea of this story, and I'd love to see this book adapted. But I can see a classic version of this book set in the time in which the book is set. But I can also see the book being brought to the modern day and also being just as gripping, because I do think that you could tell a similar story. I'm not sure about the tragedy that almost might have befallen one character. I'm not sure how that could be explained away. But for the most part, I think that it is a very human tale, and it doesn't stray towards the absurd, and everyone who does stuff, all their actions feel incredibly human, which sometimes in Victorian novels isn't the case. Sometimes they just feel like they're being fueled by the writer, but every decision here feels like it would be made by that character at the time, even if that isn't a decision that we necessarily want them to make. So I'm looking forward to continuing to read Sylvia's Lovers later on tonight. Now, I must go, and I must set about making tea for me and my family. They'll be having potatoes and something, and I'll be having vegetables and something. And I will probably see you in the morning. Hopefully, maybe. I might set an alarm. I'm not sure. If I haven't slept, it won't be happening. I really need to figure out a way to round off this video because it's a complete, unutterable mess. I did something that I always like to do with the Cosy Reading Night, and that was to finish a book. In the past, I have read graphic novels and poetry collections to have actually read and finished something on the night that this is happening, and then gone on to read something that I know I'm not going to finish that night. For Friday, it was The Quickening and a portion of the Mercies. Yesterday, I just stuck to Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. I now only have about 150 pages left of this, which is not something that I expected to be saying today. After the Cosy Reading Afternoon finished yesterday, I went downstairs to prepare tea and continued to listen to The Last Continent until Little Mix the Search came on, BBC One. Once again, wasn't going to watch it, but it was on before Strictly, and I didn't expect to get into Strictly Come Dancing last year, but it happened, and now it feels like a nice bit of normality and regularity to be on the television. Also, I kept getting to pause it because people would come home and I'd need to do stuff, so I ended up getting to skip through all the parts I didn't like. So today was Cosy Reading morning. The clocks went back last night, so we supposedly get an extra hour of Sunday. My brother, unfortunately, his work do it differently, and they're probably the only place in Cheshire that won't put their clocks back until noon. So at noon, they'll turn it back to 11 o'clock. My brother's left work by then. So he went into work at 5 o'clock this morning because to them it was 6 o'clock. So I don't actually know whether he's gained an hour or lost an hour or what's going on with that poor unfortunate soul. But this morning I did awake an hour late for the Cosy Reading morning, but I listened to more of The Last Continent by Terry Pratchett, and I now have 5 hours left. I am so thrilled to be getting back into these audiobooks, and the Terry Pratchett books, I just think that they were created to be read. Not the poetry, there is some great comedic timing in there, and I haven't enjoyed a Rincewind book before, so this has really broken the mould for me with those ones because it's a Rincewind book and I'm actually enjoying it and I'm enjoying the humour. Maybe I'm just becoming an old man. I don't know, I wouldn't like to question it. Some things that I've cut out from this week have been all of the parts where I've chosen to be somewhat too aspirational. Alongside these 3 books, The Quickening, Nudibranch and Sylvia's Lovers, this week I also wanted to read Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope and The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you my original pile of possibilities, and yes, I did steal that from Sarah over at Hardcover Hearts, and yes, it was robbery because I did not even ask before I used the phrase. But I pulled out tons of books on Friday morning with the possibility of reading them on Friday evening, knowing that I would not have the time to finish The Quickening beforehand, but being incredibly hopeful. So let's just look at how hopeful Charlie was together. Firstly, on Monday, I said how I want to read The Picture of Dorian Gray. Again, I'm looking for something quite spooky for this final week of Victober, but also because there is something within me that, on the one hand, I kind of want that feeling of being spooked. I'm questioning whether it's not just me wanting to prove to myself that I still have actual human emotion. So I've also included some more tales of horror on this list. The rest of this horror fiction is stuff that I picked up from the charity shop. Last year, I really tried to get into the horror genre because I kept saying that I had avoided it because I didn't like the idea of being scared, but having read so many thrillers and seeing how gory they could be, indeed some popular fiction has been quite gory recently, I thought, you know what, we can probably cope with gore. So I started and I read Christine by Stephen King because I knew that story, wasn't scared. I read The Exorcist because Dane of Dane Reads talked about how that was the only book to ever properly put the fear of, well, an unnamed spiritual figure into his head. But it didn't get me. Indeed, I ended up thinking that Reagan didn't really become a character until she got possessed. These books have tried and failed to tap into the fear I have now. Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss tapped into this horrible sense of tension that I have related to things that went on in my life as a child. So I know that it's possible for a book to absolutely ruin me mentally. That's not what I'm wanting. I don't know. I've really been questioning why I want to read some horror fiction. I also have Local Haunts, the most recent anthology by a few booktubers and horror tubers and author tubers. A lot of tubers going on there. Add a few potatoes, we've got a meal on our hands. I've got that on my Kindle to read. I've also just ordered the paperback copy by accident, but that's another story. Either way, I have Ghost Story by Peter Straub, or Straub, and there's something about a Chowder Society and ghost stories. I've heard people say that this is quite scary indeed. In the back it says that it's superb horror, so there might be something here that will keep me awake at night, but I don't really need horror fiction to do that. I have a brain. Then I also got It by Stephen King. Now, this book is over 1,000 pages long, so I'm definitely not going to read this in one night. This is the only Stephen King book that I tried to read pre-BookTube. It was in a mass market paperback edition, and as a teenager I didn't really properly get what was going on, so I put it down. I do know, however, that there was a bit of a very visual scene that scared me, but I watched the film version of this earlier this year, and I wasn't terrified by the monster. Indeed, the people were more horrible in that film, but I wasn't scared. I've got Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. We were throwing this copy away at work because it doesn't have the dust jacket, so I put 50p in the donation pot and took it, but I've had the ending spoiled for me. I will admit that the bit I read at the start did sound a bit like Stephen King, so I have hopes for this one. There's this thing about Stephen King where I question the horror writing part of it. To me, he's writing stuff which is a bit like what I look for from the urban fantasy genre. Stephen Chbosky, Stephen King. Then I also have another Stephen King, which is Lisey's story. I can't remember what this is about. I don't think that this is going to be getting read at all tonight, but it exists. I picked up The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This would be a reread for me. This is also a possibility for tonight. This isn't scary at all. It's just about this boy who lives in a graveyard, and I particularly liked it a few years ago, so I thought, well, that might be nice to read for Halloween. Then I have The Mercies by Kiran, Millwood-Hargrave. On the front it says that this is a beautiful and chilling book that comes from Madeline Miller. Basically, I believe that this book is about killing witches. We're clutching at straws here to try and spook ourselves, really. I'm aware none of these books are Victorian, and you might want that from a Victober vlog. And then I just have two more possibles, which one is Drive Your Plows Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And on the back it says there's murder and there's an old lady. And then I have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This just feels like it's going to be an autumnal book. I don't know much about it anymore because I've forgotten that, but I think there's a house and possible weird rooms in the house. I'm hoping that I will still be able to record bits tonight and create something of the Cozy Reading Night vlog, but if I'm not, I'll be back tomorrow to catch up on everything that happened today. So, as you can see, I was clearly more hopeful than I ought to have been, and really all I did was reveal most of the books that I have acquired from the charity shop over the last 12 months. Other people will talk about watching horror films and spooky films the year round. I rarely watch films. I rarely read horror fiction. I don't know why it stopped either, because I was really enjoying it last year. Realising that my soul is such that it's basically just this darkened husk now, if it exists. And that really I'm aware that people are worse than any monster in fiction. So despite the fact that I am still reading Sylvia's Lovers and I plan to finish this week, I do have some plans for the books that I want to read in this final week of Victober. I will just say that in terms of Street Pie Men and Traffic from the Little Black Classics collection, I am not too fussed about reading them this month. I won't be participating in Non-Fiction November as brilliantly as other people because I haven't been reading much non-fiction this year and I never think that I do too well at it. If you didn't know, Non-Fiction November is something that is hosted by Olive of... Bloody hell, I've forgotten her name. Yeah, great. A book Olive. Great, yeah. And so it's all about reading non-fiction. If you don't generally read non-fiction, then you read one non-fiction book. But as I do want to get more writing done in November, as I do still plan on participating in Vlogmas, despite the fact that I keep having this existential crisis whereby I have to think of it in the way that it's just the vlog en masse and it's celebrating the vlog and throughout the month of December, because really I am not the biggest person, related to like the Christmas thing, and really I'm looking more like at the Yulemas thing, and it's all this sort of religious stuff that's kind of ingrained into you. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. I won't mind reading these in November. What I want to do first is look... I can't fix this piece of hair right here. It's just annoying me now. I want to look at the books that I added to my Victober TBR at the end of September and talk about why I haven't read them. So what I want to talk about first is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, because this is a book that I was reading for a read-along hosted by Emily of Novell Novels and Kate Howe. They had the Zoom meeting last night and I missed it, but that wasn't me being mean to either of them. I didn't finish the book, so I didn't think that it was good to come into a discussion not remembering much about... Well, I remember portions of this book from when I read it 12 years ago, but I didn't remember enough, and I only got 4 chapters in this month. Yes, I am somewhat disappointed with myself, but I do still hope to get this read sooner rather than later. Maybe I'll read it in December. We'll see. Let's not make any promises. Next we had Shirley, which is the official book of Victober this year. And again, I just decided that I didn't particularly want to do the group reads. And they are books that I want to read. I'm reading Sylvia's Lovers, and I'm thinking Shirley might be somewhat similar in story, in plot. Now, I know a lot of people have given up on this book, and I don't know whether it's because of a similar reason to me, and once again, no shade towards people. Whenever there's a group read or something like that, I end up feeling like it's required reading at school. And so I always want to read something else instead, because there's just this tiny little rebellion within me that says, no, don't do what other people want you to do. Get to it in your own time. So I own Shirley, I own Charlotte Bronte. No, I don't. I own Shirley and I own Jane Eyre, and I will read them one day. It's just that it's not this year. Just because Victober's over doesn't mean that we have to stop reading Victorian books. Indeed, if you have enjoyed reading more Victorian books this year, why don't you add that to your resolution to find more books to read? Last year, I downloaded tons of audiobooks that I planned to listen to this year, and then my headphones broke. And I had no speaker. I now have both, and as I said earlier, it's been a revelation. Then I also have Sketches of Young Ladies, Young Gentlemen and Young Couples by Charles Dickens. Apparently it's a satirical take on young men and women of the time, and Charles Dickens is mocking them. Again, I would really like to read this book before the end of Victober, but I don't think it's going to happen. And once again, I have no problem pushing this back to December. Now, why do you think I'm saying December? Well, basically, as I say, already getting a pretty full-on month in November. And not just because I want to spend it writing. I've got books planned to read then. I want to read Miss Spencer's Beetle. I want to read other books that I've got behind me. Should I do a TBR? Should I do a TBR and really ruin things for myself? Should I try that? Should I try that? Would you like that? Let me know. Anyway, I just had this alliterative thought in my head that other people have had for years. Dickens in December. I have his The Life of Our Lord that I stopped from being thrown away at the charity shop. I always like to reread A Christmas Carol, so why don't we just do a bit of Dickens in December as well as some of the other Christmas books that we want to read. However, if I get to it before then, great stuff. I'm aware that I seem to be wrapping up my Victober a week beforehand, but know that I want to pare everything back. So I'm back at work tomorrow. We can't really be going into this week with any hopes or aspirations, really, can we? It's work. I know from prior experience that when I work, when I get home, I do not feel like reading. So we have The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. This was never going to be a book I read. Never. I took a picture of it for Instagram and I got it from the charity shop so it didn't get thrown away. It's George Eliot I have the audiobook. I will probably listen to the audiobook, but I will be completely honest, I am not hopeful about George Eliot. I remember trying to read her work when I was at school and I didn't care for it. I'm willing to try it again. I have The Mill on the Floss and Middlemarch to listen to on audiobook, so we will see how I feel about that afterwards. And then we have The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This was one that I really hoped to get to this week because I did rather like The Law and the Lady. But again, when I mentioned this on my TBR for Victober, this one was always very tenuous. It just got brought more to the forefront because of The Law and the Lady. Again, I do have the audiobook of this, so I'm thinking of maybe listening to this in the mornings before work or when I'm doing housework. But I'm definitely planning on finishing this one before the end of the year. Maybe I'll do a bit of mix and match of reading it and listening to it. I find that that helps out really well with Victorian literature sometimes because there are just some brilliant passages that work so well to be read. Now I want to talk about what my plans for reading are this week. Firstly, my plan starts with finishing Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. This week I found myself really surprised because I pushed through, I read slower, and I ended up really becoming enamoured with the characters and their stories. And I think that I have included the bit where I talked about this book yesterday, but know that my feelings are still much the same. I am surprised by how fearless Gaskell is with her characters, how she doesn't really mind tormenting them. And so I'm really interested to see how this is going to end. Barchester Towers is a book that I am also going to be putting to the side until November because I want to dedicate as much time as possible to Anthony Trollope. I really enjoyed The Warden and it's taken me the longest time to get to that, so I can wait until November to read Barchester Towers. I don't think I'm going to storm through the series. I might read one here and there, but I'm really looking forward to just taking my time. Hopefully, I thought I'd take my time with The Warden and I sped through that. Telltale Heart is still on this TBR to be read before the end of Victober. I am not going to be reading the giant version up there because I'm back at work. And so what will be happening is that I will be taking a little black classic to work with me as I did earlier this month, and I will be reading a portion there and finishing it at home. So I think The Telltale Heart will come to work with me tomorrow. Then I have A Slip Under the Microscope by H.G. Wells, Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti. I adore Rossetti's prose, so revisiting it, if I don't get the opportunity to, will be sad, but I know this. I know her poetry. More poetry from Gerard Manley Hopkins. Again, I might push this back to November, but we'll see. Lord Arthur Savile's Crime is one that I definitely want to read this week. And I'm still not sure about the letters of Mozart to his father, but I would like to round the month off by getting some letters in there. Also, I definitely will be reading Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands by Mary Seacole. It is my plan to read this book on Wednesday. That brings me to this book. And this book is 400 pages long. I don't know how I'm going to go about reading it time-wise and having other stuff, but it's Dracula. Dracula has overshadowed many a Victober by the fact that I have owned this book for 7 years and still haven't read it. I would really like this year to be the year that I read Dracula. Halloween is approaching. I have yet to be scared by modern horror fiction. Could classic horror fiction do it? Let's not forget I ended up mildly terrified at the start of this month by a short story by Elizabeth Gaskell that just mentioned ghosts. So could the creepiness and the lack of technology terrify me here? We'll find out. I am going to be reading my best friend's Exorcism, and I'm also going to be reading Autumn Crow by Cameron Chaney, and I'm going to be reading Local Haunts, a horror tube anthology. This was put together by Regina St. Clair of Regina's Haunted Library. It has a ton of horror tubers and booktubes featured here who have all written short stories based on a rather spooky setting, and some of your booktube favourites are in here. I am really looking forward to reading this one. I do have the Kindle copy of this, but the Hard copy just looks somewhat stunning, so I wanted it on my shelves. These are 3 modern books. Modern books can be read incredibly quickly. Indeed, I'm considering just dedicating my entire Thursday to reading my best friend's Exorcism. Dracula is going to be a bit more difficult to get through. I don't deny that. Mary Seacole, short, fast, and necessary history. We are going to be trying and reading 10 books this week. Well, I am going to be trying to read 10 books this week. It has happened before. I don't think it's going to happen. I think I will supremely disappoint myself. But, you know, I've always been a disappointment. Just ask my father. Well, I hope that I've managed to craft this into some sort of Frankenstein's monster of a video, that you got to hear me talk about Victober and Cosy Reading Night. Again, if you haven't checked out Cosy Reading Night, then it's done for now. I don't know when it'll be coming back. Maybe December. Go over to Lauren of Lauren and the Books channel and just see it, because 1, creating incredible content, and 2, she's about to start Vlogmas in December, and her videos have always inspired me and are some of the best. Indeed, you could also go and watch her partner Beardy David, whose videos I recently watched in an entire binge watch session of just watching him watch Disney movies. They are truly joyous people, and they have been brightening up my week, I can tell you, as do many booktubers. And if you want to know which ones, go to my other folks videos playlist, because I haven't had much chance to update it this week. There we go. I made it to the end of this video. I managed to cobble something together, and whether you enjoyed it or not, I don't care. I did it. And until next time, that is all.